The Florida sun beat down mercilessly as Neil Armstrong made his way across the concrete sprawl of Cape Kennedy. It was July 16, 1969, just 3 hours before launch, and while the rest of the Apollo 11 crew was undergoing final medical checks, Flight Director Deke Slayton had pulled Neil aside for what he called a private word. "You understand what's really at stake today, don't you, Neil?" Deke asked, his voice barely audible over the distant rumble of preparation. Neil nodded, the weight of responsibility pressing down harder than the heavy Florida humidity. "I do." What the public didn't know, what only a handful of NASA's highest-ranking officials and a select few in the White House understood, was that Apollo 11's mission carried far more significance than just winning the space race against the Soviets. Intelligence reports suggested the Russians had discovered something unusual on the far side of the moon during their unmanned Lunar missions, something they were keeping secret even from their own cosmonauts. Neil had been briefed in a windowless room at the Pentagon 6 months earlier. The surveillance photographs showed what appeared to be unusual geometric formations, too regular to be natural, visible only from certain orbital trajectories. The briefing officer, a stern man from an agency whose name Neil was never told, had made it clear. "Your primary mission remains the same. But if you find anything unusual, anything at all, you're to document it with the special equipment we're providing. The American people can't afford surprises." As Neil walked back to join Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins, he felt the small key hanging from a chain around his neck. The key to a special compartment in the lunar module containing equipment not listed on any official manifest. The launch was perfect. The journey to the moon proceeded without incident. But as they approached lunar orbit, Neil began experiencing something the simulators hadn't prepared him for: vivid dreams of his childhood home in Ohio, of his father taking him to an airshow when he was just 6 years old, watching the planes dance across the sky. "You seem distracted," Buzz remarked on their second day in transit. "Something on your mind?" Neil forced a smile. "Just thinking about home." He couldn't tell Buzz about the dreams or about how, with each passing hour, they were becoming more intense, more real than the cramped confines of the command module. In one particularly vivid sequence, he saw his late mother standing in their backyard in Wapakoneta, pointing up at the moon and saying, "They're waiting for you, Neil." When they finally entered lunar orbit, passing around to the far side and temporarily losing communication with Houston, Neil felt a strange sense of déjà vu. The craters and mountains below seemed familiar, as if he'd seen them countless times before. Not just in NASA photographs and simulations, but in some deeper memory he couldn't quite access. "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." Neil's voice was calm, professional, betraying none of the adrenaline coursing through his veins as the lunar module settled onto the moon's surface. But inside, his heart raced with a mixture of triumph and apprehension. The expected response came back. "Roger, Tranquility, we copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot." What the millions listening on Earth didn't hear was the private channel that activated moments later, a channel directly to NASA Director Thomas Paine. "Umbrella status?" came the terse question. Neil glanced at Buzz, who was busy checking systems, then responded. "Confirmed. We'll deploy during EVA." Before their historic first steps, during the preparations for their moonwalk, Neil managed a private moment when Buzz was occupied with equipment checks. He quickly opened the special compartment using the key from around his neck and retrieved a small device no bigger than a pocket watch. NASA had called it a specialized radiation detector, but Neil suspected it was something far more advanced. "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." The words came naturally as Neil's boot made contact with the lunar surface. The world watched, mesmerized, as 2 American astronauts bounded across the lunar landscape, planting flags, collecting samples, and conducting experiments. What wasn't broadcast was Neil's solitary journey to what mission planners had designated East Crater, a small depression just beyond the camera's range. There, sheltered from view, Neil activated the device. It emitted no sound, no light, but the dial spun rapidly before settling on a series of coordinates. Neil felt his hands trembling slightly as he followed the readings, moving carefully across the lunar surface until the device began pulsing steadily. He brushed away the fine lunar dust with his gloved hand, revealing what appeared to be a perfectly smooth section of stone, too smooth to be natural. And then, as if responding to his presence, a faint blue glow emanated from beneath the surface, forming patterns that matched the strange dreams he'd been having since leaving Earth. "My God," Neil whispered, the words lost in his helmet. He wanted to call Buzz over to share this incredible discovery, but his orders had been explicit. Document, but do not disclose, not even to his crewmate. With shaking hands, Neil used the device to capture readings and images that would be downloaded directly to a secure server back on Earth. When they returned to Earth, splashing down in the Pacific on July 24th, Neil was immediately separated from Buzz and Michael under the guise of specialized medical protocols. For 3 days, he was debriefed by men whose identities remained classified, in a facility he suspected was not even on NASA property. "What you found confirms our suspicions," the lead interrogator told him. "The Soviets discovered similar structures during their Luna 9 mission, but they've kept it quiet. We believe these structures predate human civilization by thousands, perhaps millions of years." Neil found his voice, hoarse from hours of questioning. "What does it mean?" The man's expression remained impassive. "That's above your clearance level, Armstrong. What matters is that you've served your country with distinction. What matters is that we got there first." In the months that followed, Neil gradually withdrew from public life. The ticker tape parades, the global tour, the endless interviews. He participated in all of them, saying all the right things, smiling for all the right cameras. But part of him remained on the lunar surface, standing over that smooth stone with its mysterious blue glow. Years passed. Neil rarely spoke about the moon landing, becoming known for his reclusiveness. To most, he was simply a humble hero who preferred privacy to fame. But there were nights, especially when the moon was full, when Janet, his wife, would find him standing in their backyard, staring up at the sky with an expression she couldn't quite define. "Do you miss it?" she asked him once. Neil's response was cryptic. "Sometimes I'm not sure I ever left." In 1994, 25 years after Apollo 11, Neil received an unexpected visitor at his Ohio farm. The man arrived without appointment, in an unmarked black car. He was elderly now, but Neil instantly recognized him as one of the interrogators from that debriefing facility in 1969. "They're going back, Armstrong," the man said without preamble. "Not NASA, private enterprise. They have technology we couldn't have dreamed of in '69. They'll find it all." Neil invited the man inside. Over coffee, the visitor explained that the government had been studying the data Neil collected for decades, making breakthroughs in quantum physics, materials science, and energy production, all kept classified at the highest levels. "Why are you telling me this now?" Neil asked. "Because they've deciphered the message," the old man replied, sliding a folder across the table. "And it was meant for you specifically." Inside was a series of translations, mathematical sequences that, when properly interpreted, formed words in a language that had never existed on Earth. The message was simple but profound. The first visitor returns home. "I don't understand," Neil said, though a part of him, the part that still dreamed of blue light beneath lunar dust, felt a shock of recognition. "The structures you found weren't just built by aliens, Armstrong. They were built for us, for humanity. They're benchmarks, signals to indicate when we'd advanced enough to begin the next phase of whatever it is we're supposed to become." Neil stared at the papers, memories flooding back, not just of the moon landing, but of the dreams that had haunted him since childhood, dreams of the stars, of discoveries beyond imagining. "There's a second part to the message," the old man continued. "A part we only recently decoded. It says, 'When the circle completes, the journey begins.'" Neil Armstrong died on August 25, 2012, at the age of 82. His family reported that his last words were about the beautiful view of the hills outside his window. But Janet knew differently. In his final moments, with clarity that had eluded him for days, Neil had gripped her hand and whispered, "They're coming to take me home now." That night, astronomers around the world reported an unusual phenomenon. A brief blue glow on the lunar surface, visible only for seconds, in the region once known as Tranquility Base.in. Neil Armstrong's personal effects, investigators found a small journal he had kept since 1969. Most of the entries were mundane: weather reports, farm maintenance notes, family events. But on the final page, written in a hand steadier than he had managed in years, was a single sentence. "The circle completes. The journey begins." The journal was quietly confiscated by government officials and never made public. But those who knew Neil best, those who had seen the distant look in his eyes whenever he gazed at the moon, understood that America's reluctant hero had carried secrets far heavier than the weight of history. His small step had indeed been mankind's giant leap, just not in the direction any of us had imagined.